Have you ever felt reality contradict itself in a way that made your stomach drop, like remembering a conversation that never happened, then watching it unfold word for word days later, or driving a familiar route and suddenly feeling like you slipped into the wrong version of it for a moment? Not confusion, not imagination, a sharp, unsettling clarity, as if something behind the scenes just corrected itself. Most people ignore that sensation because it doesn't fit the story they've been told about how the world works. But it stays with you because some part of you knows that what just happened wasn't meant to be dismissed. What if those moments aren't errors in your mind, but mismatches between how you think reality works and how it actually responds? What if the reason your thoughts never seem to change anything is because reality was never listening to them in the first place? Beneath the surface of everyday life exists a hidden reality governed by rules most people never interact with directly. And according to what quantum consciousness has been quietly suggesting for decades, awareness, not thought, is the interface. Most of us move through life rehearsing ideas, replaying memories, projecting outcomes, assuming reality reacts to effort. But effort isn't perception. Thinking isn't presence. And the quantum field doesn't respond to noise. It responds to attention that's actually here. That's why sometimes nothing changes, no matter how hard you try. And other times, everything shifts without effort. Timing sharpens. Encounters feel staged. You sense that reality isn't ignoring you, it's waiting. If you've ever felt that sudden stillness before something important happens, that subtle pressure that tells you to pay attention now, you're not broken or overanalyzing. You may be standing at the exact point where consciousness stops being internal and starts becoming causal. And once you understand why that line exists, it becomes impossible to cross it accidentally again. Before we go any further, understand this moment isn't meant to be consumed quietly. Recognition only becomes real when it's acknowledged. When you press like on this video, you're not approving an idea, you're participating in a signal. You're helping this perspective stay visible in a system that usually buries anything that asks people to become more conscious instead of more distracted. That simple action is a tribal marker. It says you're paying attention. Choosing to subscribe here isn't about following a channel or waiting for notifications. It's a decision to step into a shared space with people who refuse to live entirely inside their thoughts. People who are willing to engage reality at the level where it actually responds. This isn't a mass movement. It's a deliberate one, and it only works because the people inside it are aware of what they're doing. There's one small ritual that anchors this. In the comments, write this exact phrase: I'm present enough to notice. Don't add anything else. Don't explain it. Just place it there. That sentence quietly connects you with others who feel the same shift, but may not yet have words for it. With that intention set, we can move beyond speculation, because what comes next isn't belief or philosophy. It's the scientific discovery that reveals why consciousness, not thought, is what reality actually responds to. What finally forced science to admit that thought alone was never the driving force behind. Reality came from an experiment that deeply unsettled even the people who ran it. In 1978, at Princeton University, physicist John Archibald Wheeler formalized what became known as the delayed choice experiment, an extension of the original double-slit work. Wheeler asked something that went directly against common sense. What if a particle does not decide what it is until the moment it is observed, even if that observation happens after the particle has already passed the point where the outcome should have been determined? In the experiment, single photons were sent through an apparatus where the decision to measure them as waves or particles was made after the photon had already traveled its path. Classical logic said the results should already be fixed, but the data showed the opposite. The photon behaved as if it adjusted retroactively, responding to how it was observed in the present. Measurement didn't just reveal reality, it participated in creating it. This was the observer effect operating directly inside the quantum field, without metaphor or interpretation. And this means that you are not living in a world that responds to your wishes, affirmations, or repeated thoughts. You are living in a world that responds to awareness itself. When nothing changes, no matter how much you think, plan, or visualize, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because thinking is not observation, and the hidden reality beneath daily life only responds when consciousness is actually present. If that feels uncomfortably accurate, it's because many people sense this truth long before they can explain it. As physicists continued exploring consciousness expansion, they began to realize something even more destabilizing. Observation isn't passive, it's participatory. The quantum field doesn't respond to effort or intention alone. It responds to coherence between attention and the present moment. That's why life often feels stuck when the mind is scattered, and why sudden awareness can trigger strange effects. Precise timing, repeated patterns, moments where reality feels unusually responsive. If you've experienced that, you're not imagining it. You're noticing how the system actually works. But here's where the science turns inward. If observation changes outcomes, then the most important variable isn't the experiment anymore. It's the observer's internal state. And that raises the question modern physics is only beginning to touch. What happens when awareness becomes coherent instead of fragmented? Because the next discovery explains why the body feels it first, long before the mind catches up. As physics pushed deeper into the role of the observer, another discovery began filling in the missing piece: coherence. In the 1990s, researchers at the HeartMath Institute in California started measuring how human physiological states interact with surrounding electromagnetic fields. What they found challenged the idea that perception is generated solely by the brain. The heart produces an electromagnetic field thousands of times stronger than the brain's. And when emotional and attentional states become coherent, that field changes in measurable, repeatable ways. Even more unsettling, those changes extend beyond the body, interacting with the surrounding quantum field. This wasn't philosophy, it was data. Instruments detected synchronization between internal biological rhythms and external environmental signals. And this explains why intuition doesn't feel like thinking. It arrives as sensation, a pressure in the chest, a subtle tingling in the hands, a sudden stillness where everything feels clear without effort. Those moments aren't emotional reactions. They're the body registering coherence before the mind forms an explanation. And this explains why so many people report similar physical sensations right before meaningful shifts in their lives, even without sharing experiences. Heightened sensitivity, sharper awareness, time feeling oddly elastic, brief moments where everything seems aligned, followed by fatigue or uncertainty. That's not confusion, it's resonance recalibrating. When consciousness stops scattering itself across fear, memory, and anticipation, the body becomes a tuning instrument, and reality responds to tuned systems differently than it responds to noise. If you've ever felt your intuition spike just before a major decision, or sensed something change before any external evidence appeared, that wasn't coincidence. It was feedback. The quantum field doesn't communicate in words. It communicates through sensation and timing. As coherence increases, the signal strengthens before the mind understands what's happening. That's why this phase can feel destabilizing. You're sensing alignment before your identity has adjusted to it. This is where it becomes deeply human, because increased awareness doesn't arrive without cost. As coherence grows, misalignment becomes harder to ignore. Old habits feel heavier. Certain relationships feel louder. You may feel exposed, uncertain, or quietly alone, despite understanding more than ever. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the nervous system learning to operate at a higher resolution. And once that adjustment begins, pretending you don't feel it is no longer an option. There's a part of this understanding that almost no one prepares you for, and it has nothing to do with insight or clarity. It has to do with cost. When you begin to see how awareness actually shapes experience, it becomes harder to pretend you don't notice the deeper currents running through everyday life. Conversations feel thinner. Certain ambitions lose their pull. You start sensing misalignment before anything visibly breaks. And carrying that awareness can feel isolating, not because you're superior to anyone else, but because you're no longer fully asleep inside the same story. There were moments when I questioned whether this way of seeing was worth it. Moments when doubt crept in quietly, asking if it would be easier to return to certainty, to stop noticing, to let thought take over again. Fear doesn't arrive dramatically here. It arrives as a low-grade lowliness, a sense of standing between worlds with no clear place to rest. The ego doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures slowly as familiar motivations stop working and external validation loses its grip. If you've felt that quiet disconnection, that sense of being present in rooms where everything feels automatic, there's nothing wrong with you. Awareness expands faster than identity can adapt, and that gap is uncomfortable. You may question yourself, wonder if you're overanalyzing or drifting too far from what feels normal. That doubt isn't weakness. It's the mind trying to recalibrate to a wider field of perception. If any of this resonates, you don't need to define it or explain it. Just allow yourself to stay with the experience instead of fighting it. There are others who feel the same internal shift, even if they've never spoken it aloud. This isn't about separating yourself from life. It's about learning how to move through it without abandoning what you now sense. Because when the ego loosens its grip on control, something steadier begins to emerge. And that steadiness is what opens the door to the next phase of real empowerment. What if the thing you've spent most of your life trying to correct was never a malfunction at all? That sensitivity you were told to toughen up, the way you notice shifts in tone, timing, and intention before anyone else does. The feeling that you don't fully fit into the rhythm most people seem comfortable moving to. Through everything we've explored, from the observer effect to coherence and resonance, those traits take on an entirely different meaning. They aren't weaknesses. They are signs of perception, operating at a wider range than you are taught how to interpret. Science has been quietly pointing to this conclusion. Wheeler showed that reality doesn't finalize itself until it's observed. Research into coherence revealed that internal alignment organizes the field around you, and the sensations you've felt, clarity without effort, intuition arriving before thought, moments when life seems to respond instead of resist, were never random glitches. They were feedback, evidence that your awareness was interacting with reality more directly than the standard framework allows. Right now, nothing needs to be fixed about you. This isn't about becoming more positive, more disciplined, or more spiritual. It's about recognition, realizing that the discomfort, the over-awareness, the sense of being out of sync were not signs of failure, but signs of bandwidth. You were perceiving more information than the old story of reality could explain. And once that lands, the internal struggle softens. You stop trying to suppress perception and start learning how to stabilize it. Here is the master key most people never receive. Reality does not respond to intensity, repetition, or force of will. It responds to the quality of awareness meeting the present moment. That's why trying harder never worked, but noticing did. When awareness becomes steady instead of scattered, influence replaces effort. Conditions begin to shift without strain. Patterns loosen naturally. But one unsettling question remains unresolved, and it matters more than any conclusion so far. If perception can expand, if awareness can shape outcomes, then what determines the limits of that expansion? Is there a boundary built into consciousness itself, or has it simply never been explored with intention? You don't need to answer that yet. You only need to feel the weight of the question. Because once awareness becomes deliberate, the next phase isn't about learning more. It's about choosing how consciously you engage with reality from this point forward. And that choice is already closer than you think. Before you step away, seal this moment consciously. In the comments, write this exact sentence: I choose awareness over reaction. Don't add context. Don't explain why. That line isn't a performance. It's a signal. A quiet declaration that you recognized yourself in what was said and decided not to drift back into automatic living. When others see it, they'll know they're not alone in noticing what most people miss. If this way of seeing resonates, understand what subscribing represents here. It isn't about updates, personalities, or content consumption. It's alignment with a small, deliberate group of people who are willing to question the surface version of reality and take responsibility for how consciously they engage with it. This space isn't built for everyone. It's built for those who feel the weight of perception and are ready to carry it with clarity instead of confusion. And if this perspective unsettled you in the right way, don't stop here. The next video moves straight into the implications most avoid. and shows how to recognize the moment awareness crosses a point of no return. The simulation has a glitch. 3 signs you've finally woken up. Your consciousness brought you here. What happens now is your choice.